Hello chess lovers, Suren here, and I have another fantastic attacking game for you played by Garry Kasparov. His opponent is Lajos Portisch, and this game was played in 1983 in Niksic, which is the second largest city of Montenegro. Now let's see what happened on the board. Kasparov started the game with d4 and knight f6 by Portisch, c4, e6, knight f3. With his last move, Kasparov sidesteps the Nimzo-Indian defense that arises after knight c3, bishop b4, and b6 by Portisch. He goes for queen's Indian defense, which is regarded as the sister opening of the Nimzo-Indian. Black is preparing to fianchetto his light-squared bishop in order to fight for the central light squares. Knight c3, bishop b7, a3, preventing any possible bishop b4 jumps, d5, c takes d5, knight takes d5, e3, knight takes c3, b takes c3, bishop e7, bishop b5 check c6, bishop d3, c5. Black is both challenging white center and also is freeing the c6 square for the knight. White castles king side, knight c6, bishop b2. Later on the long diagonal, the bishop is going to play a very important role. Rook c8, queen e2, black castles king side, rook d1. White wants to play in the center and on the king side, so his rooks belong on d1 and e1. Queen c7 and c4, a strong and inspired novelty by Kasparov. Previous games featured the incipienting e4, knight a5, which justified black's strategy. However, it's far more logical to open the long diagonal for the b2 bishop than to close the b1 h7 diagonal, with both bishops targeting black's king side. White's hanging pawns will also become a dangerous attacking instrument. C takes d4. Well, not a good move. Instead of playing c takes d4, it was better to play rook d8. If d5, then black can capture on d5 and then knight a5. If bishop e5, then bishop d6, and after the exchange of bishops on d6 square e4, the white's position is preferable, but this could have been better for black. But in the game after c4, we see c takes d4, e takes d4, knight a5. Black is coming after the pawn on c4, but Kasparov's response was very strong. He played d5. White is activating the bishop on b2. It takes d5. Well, if a move like knight takes c4, then white can play queen e4. And if g6, then bishop takes c4. If queen takes c4, then queen e5. And this is actually going to be very unpleasant for black. That's why in the game after d5 we see e takes d5, c takes d5, bishop takes d5. The central pawns are already exchanged and right now Kasparov is a pawn down. But in here he went for the first blow and captured on h7. King takes h7, rook takes d5, king g8, and another brilliant move by Kasparov this time, bishop takes g7. Look at this majestic sacrifice. This is a genuine sacrifice that permanently exposes black's king. Kasparov wrote he felt this was the crucial moment when he had to play actively. Of course, in typical positions you can't calculate up to the end, but Kasparov's intuition quickly told him he was on the right track. King takes g7, knight e5. Kasparov is also freeing the queen's diagonal and rook d8. But instead of playing rook d8, let's have a look at other variations as well. For example, if f5, then white can play rook d3. If rook f6, then rook g3 check, followed by queen h5. If bishop d6, then queen g5, and white's attack is going to be decisive. Or after knight e5, if a move like rook h8, then queen g4 check, king f8, queen f5 with a direct mating threat. If f6, then rook e1. Now if queen c1, then simply white can respond with rook d1. Or after rook e1, if a move like knight c6, then knight d7 check, and then rook takes e7 is very strong. White is removing the defender and then is capturing on f6, and the game is actually over. Black king can soon get checkmated. Let's go back. Or after knight e5, let's have a look at another line as well. If we move like queen c2, then white can give a check from g4 square and then play rook d3. If rook c3, then queen f5 check, and then queen g4, and then after bringing the queen on the third rank, white can simply win the rook on c3 square, and then the rook can come back and there's not much black can do. The game is over. Let's go back to our main game. In the game after knight e5, we see rook d8. Now comes queen g4 check, king f8, queen f5, there is a mating threat, f6 was played, knight d7 check, and rook takes d7. Black is giving up the rook in order to get rid of that active knight. Otherwise, if we move like king f7, then white can give a check from h7, and then the rook is coming and it's over. Black king is again getting checkmated. A very brutal checkmate, I think. In the game after knight d7 check, as I've already mentioned, black captured on d7. Rook takes d7, queen c5, and queen h7. Rook c7, black wants to trade as many pieces as possible in order to simplify the position, and that's logical. When your opponent is attacking, you have to try to get rid of his attacking pieces. Queen h8 check was played. By the way, instead of playing queen h8, rook d3 looks tempting, but it turns out that black has a very cunning way of equalizing the game and can go for queen takes f2 sacrifice. Now if rook takes f2, then white king can even get checkmated, or after queen takes f2, if king takes f2, then bishop c5 check. Black is opening up the 7th rank for the rook, and actually in the end of the day, black can fight for the draw. Let's go back. That's why after rook c7, Kasparov went for queen h8 check, king f7, and once the queen is removed from the 7th rank, only now he plays rook d3. Knight c4. Finally, this knight is coming into the game, but it turns out that already it's too late. Now comes the second rook, rook d1. The last piece is also joining the attack. Knight e5. Not a good move. After this move, actually, black's position is collapsing. Exhausted by the difficult defense, Portisch eases white's task. Now the attack wins by force, but even better moves wouldn't have changed the final outcome. For example, instead of knight d5, if bishop d6, then white can play rook d5. If queen takes a3, then rook h5, and again white's attack looks decisive. By the way, the idea of rook d1 is to give a check from h7 square, and then the rook can penetrate the 8th rank. For example, let's just make a random move a5, then white can give a check from h7 square, and then rook d8 check, and black king is getting checkmated. In the game after rook d1, we see knight e5. Queen h7 check, king e6. Of course, king f8 could have been met with rook d8 like in the previous line I showed. That's why king e6 was played, but now comes queen g8 check, king f5, and now white is unleashing a very dangerous king hunt. g4 check, king f4. Well, if knight takes g4, then the knight is no longer controlling the f3 square, and again black king can easily get checkmated. In the game after g4 check, we see king f4. Now comes rook d4 check, king f3. Look at this black king. Where is the king going? Queen b3 check, and finally Lajos Portisch resigned. If queen c3, then this time white can give a check from d5 square, and then queen e4 check, and then queen takes e3 checkmate. A very impressive attack by Garry Kasparov. With his 2 bishop sacrifices, he actually managed to rip open black's king's side, and then with a devastating piece play managed to start a dangerous king hunt and forced his opponent to resign. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this game. For more games, consider subscribing to my channel. I will see you in the next video. Good luck.